I held her in my arms. She was alive.
They took my sister away from me.
This is a public plea for anyone out there who has information regarding the murder of McKeeva.
When a masked gunman slipped into the home of successful entrepreneur and devoted mother McKeeva Jenkins in the middle of the night, fired a single shot at point-blank range, and disappeared before anyone could react, it seemed like a terrifying home invasion destined to become another unsolved tragedy. But the deeper this case unfolded, the more it revealed a web of hidden relationships, unanswered questions, and shocking allegations that completely changed the story. To truly understand what happened to McKeeva, we have to look beyond the violence itself, not just at the life she built, but at the people who surrounded her, the secrets kept behind closed doors, and the events that ultimately led to her final night. McKeeva Jenkins built her success through years of persistence, but that achievement came only after repeated setbacks that might have convinced many people to quit. Before investigators ever examined the final chapter of her life, there was another story worth understanding: the determined woman behind the headlines. Born and raised in Belle Glade in Palm Beach County, she refused to let limited opportunities define her future. Instead, she kept pushing toward goals that demanded patience, education, and resilience. Her academic path reflected that determination. McKeeva earned a bachelor's degree in criminology from the University of South Florida before completing a master's degree in social work at Barry University in 2009. That same year brought another turning point outside the classroom. During a New Year's Eve church gathering, she met Yuri Jenkins, the man who would later become her husband. Their shared faith quickly became a foundation for a relationship built around common ambitions and mutual encouragement. Marriage became more than a personal partnership. McKeeva constantly searched for new business opportunities while encouraging Yuri to invest in his own future as a barber. She believed success grew through action, even when the odds seemed uncertain. Together, they worked toward building financial stability instead of relying on traditional expectations about who should carry the family's responsibilities. The road, however, refused to stay smooth. In 2012, McKeeva watched both her event planning business and the nonprofit organization she had created to serve her community come to an end. Those losses carried financial and emotional weight, yet they never convinced her to abandon entrepreneurship. Rather than dwelling on failure, she shifted her focus and established Prime Enterprise Group, a consulting company dedicated to helping aspiring business owners develop strategies, write business plans, receive coaching, and gain practical guidance through educational webinars and mentoring programs. During her online broadcasts, McKeeva often spoke openly about that journey. She explained that she had spent years writing business plans for relatives and friends before realizing those skills could become the foundation of a business.
When I started, I've always written business plans for like my family and friends, but I didn't do it as a company. I was still trying to figure out what my niche was and what I wanted to do. And it was my husband that suggested I start a consulting company.
She also credited Yuri with encouraging her to launch the consulting company when she doubted they could afford another venture. At the time, she was still trying to manage a boutique occasional event planning work and her nonprofit while searching for a sustainable direction. She described feeling stretched across countless responsibilities simply to keep income coming into the household. Those conversations revealed more than business advice. McKeeva spoke about partnership, explaining that modern families often succeed because both spouses work together instead of expecting one person to shoulder every financial burden. That philosophy shaped both her marriage and her career, and it also revealed the determined mindset that defined her long before tragedy changed everything.
Hi, good morning everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is McKeeva Jenkins. I am a business coach and strategist with the Prime Enterprise.
That same determination made what happened in the early hours of June 29, 2017, feel even more incomprehensible. Just before 2 a.m., as the house sat quiet and the children slept, a masked gunman slipped through the unlocked garage door where Yuri, McKeeva's brother Markavius, and a friend named Dimitri Dale were gathered. The intruder forced them all to the ground, demanded the location of McKeeva's mother, who didn't live there, and then compelled Yuri to lead him upstairs. Within moments, a single gunshot echoed from the master bedroom. The killer fled in the family's white Dodge Charger, leaving Makiva Jenkins, 33 years old and pregnant with her fourth child, dead from a gunshot wound to the head.
Yo, somebody called the police, man. My sister just got shot in the head. Somebody came in the house and tried to take.
All right, we have units on the way, all right? And we're the medics as well.
When paramedics arrived, there was nothing left to do. While detectives searched for the person responsible, Yuri Jenkins stepped in front of television cameras carrying a grief that was impossible to disguise. Rather than focusing on the attack itself, he wanted the public to remember the woman whose life had ended so abruptly. He described Makiva as the person who kept their family grounded, calling her a devoted mother, a determined entrepreneur, and his closest partner in every ambition they shared. Together, he said, they often joked that they were Jay-Z and Beyonce, a couple driven by the same vision and work ethic.
She was a good mother. She kept me level.
How do you want people to remember Makiva?
She was an entrepreneur. She was that.
I mean,
I'm an entrepreneur, and we just clicked together. We used to call ourselves Jay-Z and Beyonce, a power couple.
The interviews soon shifted toward another subject that had begun circulating online. Some people questioned whether Makiva's public posts celebrating her business achievements had made her a target for the masked intruder. Yuri rejected that suggestion without hesitation. Frustrated by the speculation, he insisted people should stop attacking her reputation and instead remember the reality of who she was. In his words, Makiva had built her success from almost nothing, becoming a loving wife, a dedicated mother, and a self-made businesswoman through years of determination. Away from the cameras, investigators concentrated on evidence that could be measured instead of theories. The strongest lead came from the white Dodge Charger taken from the Jenkins home after the shooting. Detectives gathered surveillance footage from throughout the neighborhood, carefully comparing recordings from homes, nearby streets, and surrounding businesses. Piece by piece, they reconstructed the vehicle's movements during the early morning hours. The recordings revealed two vehicles entering the area shortly before the crime unfolded. About 18 minutes later, the stolen Charger appeared, leaving the neighborhood and heading north. Camera after camera followed its path until detectives narrowed the route to a 3 or 4 block section where the trail effectively ended. Investigators believe the driver may have abandoned the car there before leaving in a second, darker vehicle seen nearby. Unfortunately, none of the available footage provided a clear enough image to identify the people inside either vehicle. Even so, the search area proved valuable. Officers located the abandoned Dodge Charger within that same radius. The keys remained inside, along with a black t-shirt that investigators collected as potential evidence. The discovery strengthened their timeline, but it still failed to answer the most important question. Who had driven the vehicle away from the murder scene? Lead Detective Sean Oliver of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office turned to the public for help. He explained that the Charger had been abandoned on Lawrence Road, just south of Pensacola Road, approximately 9/10 of a mile from the Jenkins residence. Detectives asked anyone who had been in that area between 1:50 a.m. and 2:20 a.m. on Thursday, June 29th, to come forward if they had noticed a vehicle parked on the roadside or anyone walking nearby.
We believe that either that person left on foot, had a car waiting for them, and we are just asking that anyone in that area between the hours of 1:50 in the morning and 2:20 in the morning on June 29th, which is a Thursday. If they saw a car on the shoulder of the road, if they saw anyone walking, please call the sheriff.
At that stage, investigators believed even the smallest observation could become the piece that finally identified the person behind Makiva Jenkins' killing. For months, detectives chased every lead they could find, yet the investigation refused to settle on a clear suspect. The abandoned rental vehicle offered valuable clues about the killer's movements but failed to identify the person behind the mask. Instead, investigators turned their attention back to the people who had survived the night inside the Jenkins home. As we follow the case, that shift in focus would prove far more important than the stolen car itself. One individual quickly drew heightened attention: Dimitri Dale. Detectives found his timeline difficult to ignore because he had arrived at the Jenkins residence only minutes before the armed intruder appeared. Facing murder charges himself and under growing pressure from investigators, Dimitri agreed to cooperate. During interviews, he identified a 19-year-old acquaintance named Jovan Joseph as the masked gunman. According to Dimitri, Jovan had been struggling financially and accepted an offer to participate in the crime. Based on that information, authorities arrested Jovan and charged him with first-degree murder. At first, however, Jovan denied having anything to do with Makiva's death. The physical evidence also challenged the original appearance of the crime. Expensive belongings remained untouched throughout the home, including Makiva's laptop and other electronics sitting in plain view. Aside from the vehicle used to escape, the intruder left without taking valuable property. Those details pushed investigators away from the theory of a robbery that spiraled into violence. Dimitri's account introduced something much darker: a planned contract killing. According to Dimitri, Yuri Jenkins had arranged for the murder because he no longer wanted to remain married and believed he would gain financially from Makiva's death. He claimed he had introduced Yuri and Jovan the day before the shooting so they could meet in person. Dimitri further alleged that an initial payment had already changed hands before the plan moved forward. If his version of events proved accurate, the grieving husband presented to the public had secretly organized the killing from the beginning. Despite those accusations, Yuri publicly denied every allegation. When reporters repeatedly asked whether he had murdered his wife, his response never changed.
All those negative stories that are out there right now, what are your thoughts about that?
Honestly, everybody can go to hell.
In December 2017, prosecutors formally indicted Yuri on a charge of first-degree murder. He voluntarily sat for a 2-hour interview with investigators, where he acknowledged meeting Jovan Joseph, but denied discussing any plan to kill his wife. According to Yuri, he had only seen Jovan sitting inside his home, and the two men shared no meaningful relationship. He entered a plea of not guilty, and the case moved toward trial. A major development emerged just as jury selection was expected to begin during the summer of 2019. Jovan Joseph accepted a plea agreement with state prosecutors, pleading guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for testifying against Yuri. The agreement dramatically reduced his potential punishment. Before the agreement, Jovan had faced a possible sentence ranging from 25 years to life. Jovan's statement gave investigators the most detailed version of the alleged plot. He claimed Yuri paid him $1,500 up front, promising another $10,000 after the killing. Jovan also admitted purchasing the murder weapon from a friend for $60, dressing in black clothing, and covering his face with a t-shirt before entering the house. According to his account, Yuri led him upstairs to the bedroom where Makiva slept. Jovan said he raised the gun, fired a single shot at close range, and walked away, an account that would become the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. By the time Yuri Jenkins finally stood trial again, the prosecution faced a challenge that had nothing to do with forensic evidence. Its case depended heavily on two cooperating witnesses whose stories had shifted repeatedly over time. As we examine what unfolded inside the courtroom, the central question became whether the jury could rely on testimony that seemed to evolve with each new interview. When the retrial began, Yuri's defense immediately targeted the credibility of Dimitri Dale. Attorneys reminded jurors that Dimitri had given multiple statements to investigators beginning on June 30, 2017, followed by additional interviews on August 14, 2017, and later again before trial. According to the defense, those accounts repeatedly conflicted with one another instead of forming a consistent narrative. They argued that both Dimitri and Jovan Joseph had admitted lying in the past and now had strong incentives to satisfy prosecutors because their own legal outcomes depended on their cooperation. Dimitri testified that he believed Yuri supplied the firearm used in the killing based on conversations they had before the crime. Jovan presented an entirely different version. He told jurors he personally bought the revolver after Dimitri advised him to use that specific type of weapon because revolvers do not eject shell casings onto the ground. According to Jovan, Dimitri explained that leaving no cartridge cases behind would reduce the amount of evidence available to investigators. The defense explored those details carefully. Jovan testified that he purchased the revolver from someone known as Snakebird for about $60 after leaving Yuri's house.
And whose idea was it to get a revolver?
Dale's idea.
And why did he say to get a revolver?
Leaves no shells.
Leaves no shells? You know, what does that mean to you, leaves no shells?
It's not enough evidence for the police to collect.
Like the cartridge, when you shoot the gun, it doesn't leave a shell on the floor?
Yes, sir.
By the close of testimony, jurors were left weighing two witnesses whose accounts frequently overlapped in broad strokes, but repeatedly collided on crucial facts. As the trial continued, the prosecution acknowledged that its two central witnesses had credibility issues, yet it argued that their testimony still pointed toward the same conclusion. Even where their accounts differed, prosecutors maintained that both men independently described a coordinated plan to murder Makiva Jenkins rather than a robbery that spiraled out of control.
Did this defendant tell you that he wanted his wife killed?
He did.
Did this defendant have a discussion with you and Jovan Joseph about killing his wife?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
He did.
Did this defendant ask you to bring Jovan Joseph back to his house during the early morning hours of June 29, 2017?
He did.
The emotional weight of the trial reached another level when Makiva's brother, Markavius, appeared as a witness on the fourth day of testimony. Before taking the stand, overcome with emotion after hearing days of evidence, he unexpectedly walked toward his former brother-in-law inside the courtroom. Court bailiffs quickly intervened, preventing any confrontation and escorting him away. Later, Markavius apologized to the judge for interrupting the proceedings.
I want to start by apologizing to the judge, and I want to apologize for my actions and how I disrupted everything.
Once he testified, Markavius guided jurors back to the moments before the fatal gunshot. He recalled lying on the garage floor beside Yuri after the masked intruder ordered everyone to stay down. Speaking quietly, Markavius asked Yuri whether the armed man might be the same individual who had visited the house earlier that day with Dimitri Dale. Yuri answered that it was not the same person. Markavius then urged that they should do something instead of remaining still, reminding Yuri that children were inside the house and that they could not simply allow the intruder to move freely through their home.
I told him that, hey, isn't that your friend from earlier that day that came? He told me no, and then it went on to say that, hey, we need to do something about this, yo. We can't just let this man come in here and do whatever he want to do. You know, we live here, the kids here, we got to do something.
According to the state's case, the killing was not a random act of violence, but the result of personal and financial pressures that had been building for weeks. Evidence presented in court showed that Makiva had told Yuri shortly before her death that she wanted to end their marriage. She had explored filing for divorce in May 2017, only weeks before the shooting. Prosecutors said those plans changed after she learned she was pregnant, leading her to pause the separation. Even so, they argued the relationship had already reached a breaking point, giving Yuri a powerful reason to eliminate his wife. Another major issue centered on Makiva's life insurance coverage. She held a policy worth $500,000, along with another policy carrying a much smaller benefit. Prosecutors argued Yuri believed he had become the beneficiary of both policies and expected to receive the money if Makiva died. However, events after the murder revealed that assumption was mistaken. While arranging Makiva's funeral only days after her death, Yuri contacted the insurance company to verify the beneficiary information on the larger policy.
I understand you have some questions.
About the beneficiary information?
And you were the spouse, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm actually seeing on the application here that you were not listed as beneficiary.
Oh, wow. Is it the kid?
No, and unfortunately I can't disclose that. That's considered confidential, and I can only speak to the beneficiary on file.
Prosecutors argued Yuri only discovered that fact after the murder had already been carried out, suggesting his expectations about the insurance payout had been based on incorrect information. In May 2022, Yuri Jenkins was convicted of first-degree murder, and Circuit Court Judge Kirk Volker immediately imposed a sentence of life in prison. Dimitri Dale, whose cooperation dramatically changed the course of the investigation, avoided the original first-degree murder charge. Instead, prosecutors reduced his case to manslaughter with a weapon, resulting in 45 days in jail followed by 15 years of probation. A few weeks later, Jovan Joseph received a 15-year prison sentence for carrying out the shooting. The court credited him for nearly 5 years he had already spent in custody before sentencing.
I just want to say to everybody, this has been a long struggle for me. And what has happened to my daughter has affected my life and the life of my family. I have nothing bad to say about him. All I wanted was justice for my child. And now, nobody wins in this case. They came to the verdict I wanted them to have, but on neither side was a winner. I know how he has made his family feel, because they had no idea he could do something like this.
My take on this case isn't about the headlines or the endless arguments that surrounded it. It's about Makiva. She wasn't just another name in a true crime story. She was a mother, a daughter, a woman who worked tirelessly to build a better life and was expecting another child when that future was ripped away from her. The plans she made, the dreams she carried, and the moments her children should have shared with her were all stolen in a single act of violence. That is the tragedy at the heart of this case, and it's the part we should never forget.
So certainly, if I can go from homelessness to running a 6-figure business, I can definitely help you do the same and achieve your business goals. Hey, I'm Makiva with the Prime Enterprise Group. Welcome. I'm here to talk about business. I wish I had that kind of personality.
If stories like Makiva's matter to you, subscribe and join me as we continue telling the stories of victims whose voices deserve to be remembered long after the headlines fade.